Welcome, everybody. We'll give you a minute or so to roll in. Good morning if you're out in the Seattle area like I am, or happy lunchtime if you're where Dan is, middle of the country, and everybody in between, because I know we tend to draw from a pretty big typically we have people from all over the country, and then sometimes we have people chiming in from Guam and Puerto Rico and other places as well. So wherever you are in your day, good to have you. And speaking of where you're from, why don't you just take a minute in the chat? It's fun for us to see where we got everybody coming from. So just pop into the chat where you're coming in from. Colorado. And guys, just one sec, I have to close my door here. Sorry about that. All right, so we got New York, Florida. Yep, typically we got a good representation from the East Coast, but I don't see anybody in your neck of the woods yet, Dan. Dan's rolling in here.
Right.
He's in Kentucky near
Very close to Cincinnati, Ohio.
very close to Cincy. We got Texas, very nice. Southern California. Well, welcome everybody. So today, as Matt, one of our colleagues, likes to say, this isn't the most sexy topic, but this is really a step in the journey. This how to pay, how to borrow. There's really a journey you've been on with your kids, and both of us would like to give you big congratulations. You've gotten to this point, right? Your kids got in, you looked at your awards, and maybe you appealed, maybe you didn't. I'm going to touch on that later, that might even be something that you still need some support on this late in the game. But now you're at this last piece, and it's really important to keep your head in the game at this point. Because if you've been in our ecosystem and been on our webinars, we talk about building a list and having competing schools. So when you appeal, you can leverage that. And I always use the term casting a wide net with colleges. At this step of the process, it's kind of the same, where you're going to have different ways. If you have a gap here, right? And if you do, we're talking big numbers. It makes sense. For a lot of people, this is hard to put together. There's different ways to fill that gap. And that's what we're going to go through today, all those different ways. And if borrowing is part of that, responsible borrowing, that's a really important word, responsible, not too much. You really do need to understand all the options. And when it comes to certain buckets, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, you do want to cast a wide net, because you could potentially play some of the lenders off each other, right? Very analogous to what we've talked about with colleges around merit aid or appealing even for need-based aid. So it's just another step in the journey, and we're delighted to be here to kind of bring clarity to it, because I feel like just like everything in this process, it's murky and there's just a lot. There's a lot to understand. And so that's why we show up. We show up on this journey for you. So I'm assuming that most people on here probably have 2024 graduates. So congratulations again. You made it through the high school. If you have younger kids, that's great. Stay on, learn here, and you'll just kind of have it in the back of your head for next year. But if you're 2024, it really is game time of figuring all this out. So with no further ado, let me introduce myself. Peg Keough. I am the Director of Education here at College Aid Pro. I have a slide in a minute, but I can just jump in. If you're not familiar and you're new to us, our mission is truly to eliminate the student debt crisis by empowering families to shop smarter for college. And this step of the process is part of it. If loans are part of it, what is the best option? How much should you consider? That it's just another piece of the puzzle. So I have been doing this for quite a while and really got into it. I have twins when my kids hit high school. I did a deep dive into, I have a financial background. I'm a financial planner by background. And so the saving and all that, I was all over and helped families for years and years doing that. But just how does this all work? And that's when I started to focus just on this and had my own business. And then I joined CAP back in 2021. And I brought this guy in, Dan Bisig, onto the team because we had known each other professionally and we're friends. And he's just really top drawer, knows his way around this whole space, including admissions, but is a financial specialist as well. So Dan, take a minute, say hi, and we'll jump in because we got a lot to cover
Yeah,
today.
thanks. Yeah, thanks, Peg. So, hey, welcome everybody. Dan Bisig. So my journey, I actually was a financial planner for 25 years. And part of the way into that, I discovered this whole world of working with families on the college process. And so for the past 18 years, I've actually been coaching families on every aspect of the college, both funding and admissions process. So I'm a little bit of a unicorn, as they call me, because I know both sides of the equation. Like Peg, I helped both my son and daughter get through college. So I understand the pains that you're going through. And we're excited that you're here learning about this important topic, which is filling the gap with loans. So Peg, take it away.
All right. And actually, Dan, housekeeping. We love questions. We will do our best to answer as many as we can. Please put them in the Q&A. We'll remind you over and over again. Dan will put it in the chat. If you're putting them in the chat, you can be anonymous in the Q&A, and it's one place to look. Dan's my wingman today, so I'm going to do most of the presenting. He's going to be all over the Q&A. And this is recorded, so you will get the recording. And for our groupies, as we love to call you, but we always have something special for our live audience. So hang on to the end. We'll be respectful of your time. And we'll talk about how we can support you further. We will do our best to answer your questions, but I'm just going to proactively say, because this always happens, if you go into a big, long paragraph specifically about your family, we have to meet with you to answer specific questions. So we'll do our best to get you on the right path and get you answers, but just FYI, we'll do our best to answer as many, and if we can answer, we will. And please put them in the Q&A. So let me share my screen here, and let's get the show on the road. So already covered this. This is who we are, and that's why we are here today with you. And there are your presenters. Okay, everybody should have gotten an email who registered probably later yesterday, encouraging you to set up a free MyCap account. Dan, if you can just put that in the chat, mycap.collegeapro.com, that would be great. What's great about this is that it gives you an idea of where you are as far as your SAIs. And I'm going to mention later, I know you've gotten through this and you've gotten awards, but there might still, this year has been really crazy because you guys have gone through the whole new FAFSA. There still might be room to appeal. So being in the software is very helpful for that. Just get started for free. If you have younger kids, extremely helpful. You'll be able to use it ongoing. So strongly encourage you to go ahead and do that. All right, so let's get into this. Let's talk about the timeline. As I've said a couple times already, we are in the meat of this, right? If your child is going to a school that it is on semesters, probably going to be a little bit, it will be a little bit earlier. And you might have already seen bills. Honestly, you might already have those in your kids' portals. If you haven't, it's coming. And just like everything else in this process, it's different for every school. So my two, right? They were both at semester schools. One school I had to pay, my son was at Indiana University, go Hoosiers. I had to pay like more toward the beginning of August, his bill for the first semester, but my daughter's wasn't due until the Friday of the first week of classes, right? So very, very different due dates. You'll catch on to this for your child's school very quickly. It's just all new to you now, but those bills are going to be coming. I highly doubt you're getting a bill in the mail, right? It's all about your child's portal. There's a financial section. You're going to have to get used to being in there and taking care of it there. Then another bill for the second semester or the quarter. Quarters usually start later in September. So whatever the timeline is and however that school functions, that's going to dictate this a little bit. So if loans are part of the mix, you're going to want to be all over this and have your loan options ready and make decisions so that you can actually have that available to potentially pay part of the bill. So just keep that in mind. At the bottom here, there's a mention of payment plans. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, because that can be hugely helpful for a lot of families to actually leverage the school's payment plans. So let's start out. The first few slides are not deep into the loans yet. It's more about your household and your funds, right? So this is a good time. And I think on the next slide, we say, clean out your junk drawer or something. I'll go there in a minute. And being a financial planner, like, this is near and dear to my heart. But I think all of us, if we look at our household, there might be, if you sit down and you're married, you sit down, two spouses in the evening, and just think about, if you have a budget, and you might be cringing, like, Peg, don't say that dirty word. I do have a budget, being a planner. My husband, unfortunately has to live in this world. But if you don't have a budget, even if you don't, like, think about how you're spending your money. There might be in this junk drawer, if you will, there might be money that you're spending that you don't need to. And it really, really is true. Even $100 a month that could be scrolled away, that's money you don't have to borrow. And it will, believe me, over 4 years, it will really, really add up. So I strongly encourage you to sit down and think about that tonight, because as you're applying for loans, then you're going to choose how much you actually need to borrow. And obviously, the less you need to borrow, the better, right? And that's what we're talking about here. Hit that reset button. Anything in your life. Some people are paying, you might have Hulu and Apple and Paramount and all this stuff. And it's like, we're not really watching these three, so just putting that out there to kind of think about that. You also want to think about, and this isn't on a slide, and I ask parents this all the time when we're meeting one-on-one, like, how are you spending money for your child that you're not going to spend because they're in school? The obvious ones, sports and that kind of thing, but there might be other things. So keep that in mind. But then it requires that discipline to say, okay, we don't need to spend that because our child is off at college. We need to be disciplined and save that for college. And that all of these things can really help minimize the amount of loans that you're going to take out. Okay, let's talk about these payment plans, because this can really make it easier. It's hard. It's hard to come up with a chunk twice a year if it's semesters, or 3 times a year for quarters, right? Almost, I can't say every college because I don't know that for sure, but it's pretty rare that a college doesn't have a payment plan. They might have even referenced it on the financial aid award letter below the actual award. That might have been a paragraph down there that we have a payment plan. It's typically set up so there's a one-time enrollment fee, and it could be 60, 75, who knows, right? But it's not thousands of dollars, right? It's not crazy. And then typically it's just dividing your semester payments by 3 or 4, however the college has decided to do it. They don't charge interest. They want your money, right? They want that net revenue that they're going to get from you. So they're trying to make it so that it works for you. So definitely look at this option if it's applicable for your family, and you don't have to put the entire amount on the payment plan. You choose how it works for your family, but many families do this, right? And payment plans, as I said, if it's a semester school, it's going to be August 1st tomorrow, which is crazy. The summer's flying by, but that plan could be starting very, very soon to get into it through the college. So definitely look that up if that's new information for you. Okay, let's talk about some of the resources that you might have, because obviously if you've saved and you have certain resources, it makes sense to use them, maybe not use them all up. That's where this 4-year view is really important, and understanding the loans that I'm about to get into. But let's talk about the most common buckets that we see people have. Sometimes students have a custodial account, and that's the UGMA and UTMA are what they're called. If you've never seen that and it doesn't mean anything to you, no worries. You don't have it. But if you're like, oh yes, we do have an UTMA, that is an account that's actually been gifted to your child, and it's an asset of theirs. That can be punitive in the financial aid world and getting need-based aid. If you're not sure about all that, you should definitely talk to us one-on-one. But this is an investment that can be used to pay for college. It will have to be liquidated, obviously, and there are tax ramifications. So it's something to think about. But it is punitive when you're filling out financial aid forms. So there's definite strategies around this, because what you want to do is use the funds you have. But if you are getting certain financial aid from the college, you don't want to hurt that, right? So you want to do this strategically. So that's a bucket that we sometimes see. Very common, the second bullet, are 529s, Coverdales, and prepaid tuition plans. Those are all IRS college savings plans. If you have those, you've saved for college. You're probably the owner, your child's the beneficiary. Of course, you're going to use them. Not necessarily, oh, we have enough for 2 years, just use it all up, because you don't want to get to junior year and have a big gulp and say, now what do we do? You want to plan it out. And I'm going to touch on that in a few minutes when I talk about some of the federal loans. Also, you might have other buckets of money. I live out in Microsoft land, right? People have grants that they get from Microsoft. They sometimes have those earmarked. There's that. There's also very common gifts from grandparents. Great news starting this year for all of you, using grandparent money. If you're going to a school that only your child is, that only required the FAFSA, you can use that grandparent money whenever you want. It doesn't adversely affect financial aid down the road. It used to affect it. Now it doesn't. Some schools still look at it, the CSS profile schools, but the lion's share of schools do not. So more flexibility, not as much strategizing at a FAFSA only school, but these are all the different buckets that we usually see people have. So you're going to want to look at these buckets and how to effectively use them to minimize borrowing, right? Not just, let's just not borrow for 2 years and then we got to figure it out junior and senior year. The we got to figure it out is, or let's just, we'll figure it out. That strategy is never good across the board in this industry when you're building a list or at this stage in the process. You want to really think about it and have your 4-year idea of how you're going to cover the costs. So let's talk about 529s for a minute, because it's very common for people to have them. You have saved, and this is an IRS type of vehicle, as I said. The main thing about a 529 is you need to use the proceeds when you take distributions. You need to use it on qualified higher education expenses. This is defined by the IRS, but it's basically tuition and fees, room and board, books, not travel. That's the big one, because that's part of cost of attendance. But if your child's flying on a plane to school, that is not currently a qualified higher education expense. So for most people, it's tuition and fees, room and board, books, anything that college requires. If they have to get a certain laptop that the college loads certain software onto, that would be a qualified expense. Okay. To get the money, if you're the parent, you're the owner, you can go to Vanguard, T. Rowe Price, whoever's running the 529 that you're in, you ask for the funds. No questions asked. You don't have to document and show them that you have expenses you're covering. That's on you as the taxpayer. So you want to make sure that you're keeping a good paper trail, because if you are audited in a year that you've taken funds out of the 529, you've got to make sure you can show, I pulled that money out for qualified education expenses. As long as you do, you never pay taxes on the growth in that 529 account, which is great. You didn't pay it as it was growing, and you don't pay it when you take it out. If you make a mistake and you take funds out that you can't, basically you're going to pay tax on the earnings and a 10% penalty on the earnings amount. So it's not the end of the world, but avoid that. Make sure paper trail, paper trail, paper trail. It's really, really important. And remember, it's tax year. The IRS doesn't care about a college school year, right? You take money out in 2024, you pay those expenses that are qualified in 2024. So it goes by tax year. So you're actually going to have 5 tax years while your child's in school, not just the 4 school years. So that's how it works with a 529. One more thing before we get into the actual loans. There is a great tax credit that many people, you just won't know about it. Your CPA, if you have a CPA, they'll know about it. But they might not let you know until it's tax time, time to send everything to him or her. It's called the American Opportunity Tax Credit. It's a $2,500 credit. What a tax credit means is you do your taxes and you owe $20,000 in federal taxes. If you're eligible for this tax credit, you now owe the government 17,500 instead of that 20,000. So it's a really nice tax credit. It is per child. So if I was eligible for it when my 2 were in school at the same time, being twins, I would have gotten a $5,000 tax credit. So it has nothing to do with the college and financial aid, but it's a really nice savings in taxes if you're eligible. And you see here, for married filing jointly, just like all tax credits with the IRS, there's a phase out, right? So starting at 160 up to 180,000 adjusted gross income. If you make 181,000, then you're not eligible and up. If you're in that range, then you're not going to get the full 2,500. It'll slowly get lower. But if you make $75,000, boom, you can get this tax credit. The main thing is that you need to have $4,000 of tuition and fees and books expenses that you pay out of cash flow. You can, the biggest thing where people get in trouble is they take it out of their 529, that whatever their cost is for that year and that tax year. And then they say, oh, great, and I'm eligible for AOTC. You can't, what the IRS calls double dip, because you're getting tax advantages on your 529 or savings bonds, anything where you're getting a tax break because of the vehicle. You can't then say, oh, on those same dollars, I'm going to do a tax credit. You can't double dip. The IRS doesn't allow that. So if you're eligible, the main thing you want to remember is if you're going to pay for school up through the end of this tax year, remember 2024, make sure you're spending $4,000 out of your pocket, not out of a 529, just anything that's not a tax advantaged account, and you'll be good to go. Otherwise, it's gonna zap you at the end, and your CPA is gonna say, we can't take it this year. And it's a great credit if you can get it. You do need to claim your child. So if you're divorced and you switch back and forth on who's claiming your child, you do have to claim your child to claim AOTC. So that's another place where if you're amicable in a divorce, you could talk about, making that work if you could go there. So there are other tax credits, but that's the most common one, and really beneficial if it works for your family. Okay. So that's that piece of it. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of borrowing. So basically, these are just some general statements, and then I'm gonna really zone in here. So as I said earlier, just like everything in this process, there isn't an exact answer for all of you who are on here today. There's a lot of you on here. You're not gonna all have the same loan strategy. Different things are going to matter to you. You all have different credit scores. You've got to figure out what matters. And that's what I'm going to talk about with these different types of loans, where one is an advantage over another. And then as I'm talking, you're going to start realizing what really matters to you. And that's how you're going to decide what loan options are going to work best for your family. Did
Hey,
you want to
Peg,
chime in, Dan?
can I ask you a question? So a question came up on the American Opportunity Tax Credit. Um, the $4,000, does that even account even if the family pays using a loan? In other
Yes.
words, yeah, they can still do that, can't they?
Yep. Yep. Loan works because remember, loans, you're going to pay interest on that puppy at some point, right? So you're not getting a tax break on a loan. So yes, you can absolutely, loans are part of it. And that's a great question. Great question. Okay. Yeah. Don't be shy, Dan. Chime in anytime with, your thoughts as well as, questions. Okay, so let's jump in here. So how much is too much to borrow? This is the, $6 million question, right? There is a rule of thumb, and I'm going to talk through this, but I'm going to throw in my thoughts on it too, that ideally you have no loans. And if you're in our software, we have ideal, then we have great. Great are the direct federal student loans. If you're only taking those, that's great. And I'm going to talk about those loans in a minute. The next level that's good is you're over 4 years, you are not borrowing more than what your child will probably make as a starting salary. It's a decent rule of thumb. The biggest caveat to this in my mind, and we see this time and time again, right? Kids go to college thinking they're going to be XYZ or they want to study XYZ, and they're kids, right? They get in there, they see the curriculum, they take some classes, and they realize, this really isn't for me. Like, I don't think I want to be in engineering. I might do something. I mean, it's probably pretty rare that a student that's been engineering and has an engineering brain is going to go to arts and sciences or liberal arts. But I think you get my point. I remember my kids, they're kids, right? My daughter always wanted to study social work and she never wavered. She's a trauma therapist now, but that's not the norm. I don't remember the stats. Dan probably knows them, but like tons of kids switch majors. So be really careful with this. Err on the side, obviously, of borrowing the least amount that you can. And you're going to do this every year. So if your child does do a pretty big switcheroo and is starting to study something that when they graduate, they're not going to make as much on average in salary, you can have this in your mind that, like, okay, our borrowing strategies and amounts might change. But this is a decent way of thinking about it so it doesn't get out of control, because we do have a student debt crisis, as we all know, and that doesn't happen by accident. Like, people are making decisions that probably aren't super prudent. So here's kind of your table of contents here. This is where we're going. I'm going to touch on these 5 types of loans, and then these quote unquote alternative ways of filling in the gap. And I will talk about this 5th bullet here because we don't have a slide on it, but you might have an award letter for your child where the college put a loan that they're providing. Don't overlook that. Really look into the details of that loan. And I've seen it. It's not rare, but it's not every other award letter. Look at that, because the college might be trying to match the federal government. They might be trying to be very friendly to the family. So all of these, unfortunately, you got to read the fine print. You got to know what you're signing up for, just like any legal agreement you get into. But don't overlook that. That's not something that I can talk about in depth, because every college, if they have them, they're different, right? So if you saw that anywhere, definitely dig into that and throw that in the mix as you're evaluating these other options. So let's kick this off. So you see up on the slide, we have start here, exclamation point. This is absolutely where almost every family should start. As long as you submitted the FAFSA with your child, it was their FAFSA, you submitted it, he or she or your child is automatically eligible. That's all they needed to do, along with doing a one-time loan counseling, and then they have to sign their master promissory note because they're taking out a loan. This loan is the only loan in this process that's truly a student loan, meaning your child is on this loan and nobody else is. So it's their debt, which is huge. It's great to build a credit history. That's huge, huge. And that's wonderful when they get out and want to sign a lease with friends. You're not co-signing the lease because and there's other ways to do that as well for them to start building a credit history. But this is truly their skin in the game and no one else's. The government is encouraging kids to continue their education. So they're taking a risk on people, on students that aren't a great risk, right? They don't have collateral and they don't have income. So this is how it works. There's two versions of the direct federal student loan. There's a subsidized version, sub we have up here, and unsubsidized. So the subsidized version basically means that the government is paying the interest on that loan until 6 months after graduation. So if a student gets the full amount that they can get, the maximum every year, if you're looking at tier 1, these are the numbers. If you have financial need, okay, and I'll say that again, if you have financial need, you can get this amount each year. That totals $19,000 of subsidized loans, right? That one's a no-brainer, right? You know you have to pay it back. You know your child has to pay it back if you're going to help them, but take the float on the money, right? That's a no-brainer because the government is paying that interest. That your child can graduate and 2 months after, it's 19,000, pay it off, right? You could have had that money invested or whatever else you did with it, or you could slowly save to be able to pay that off. The unsubsidized version is the same loan. The only difference is interest starts accruing when the loan is dispersed, just like any other loan. So you see over here, the maximum unsubsidized loans each year are $2,000. Now, if you have no financial need, then the college will say, well, that's okay. You can still get a direct federal student loan. It's going to be $5,500. That's the maximum for each. These are the maxes for each year over on the right here. But it's all unsubsidized. Or you could have a combination. You could have 2,000 of subsidized and 3,500 of unsubsidized. That's because the colleges can only give it to you if you have financial need. So if you don't have enough financial need, they can't give you the full 3,500. So over 4 years, except in certain circumstances where a student can get a little more of unsubsidized loans, the typical student can graduate, they will have 27,000. In my mind, that's a reasonable amount of debt for a student to be able to pay off. Like my daughter, social worker, not a high paying field. If she had that much debt upon graduation, she could afford those monthly payments. So that's people taking out 27,000 isn't causing our 1.7 trillion debt crisis. So start here. The interest rate resets every year. So for the kids that are about to start school, the interest rate is 6.53%. It went up from 5.5% from last year. It's tied to the 10-year treasury note, goes to auction in May, and it resets. The Fed, I think, is meeting today, the Federal Reserve. We'll see what Powell does. My guess is he's not going to lower rates yet, but I think he will. It might just be in September. If those rates tick down this year, this interest rate will go down for next year for your child's sophomore year. So they probably will have 4 different interest rates if you do this every year. But by far, this is the best place to start. You will see at the bottom, it's use it or lose it. And what that means is if you don't do it freshman year because you have a 529 and you can pay the whole bill, you can't go back junior year when you don't have any more 529 funds and say, hey, I want that 5,500, the best loan out there that's only on my child's social, and they have to have skin in the game. You can't do that. So you really want to plan this out over 4 years, and we can help you with that so that you're maximizing all your buckets, your savings buckets, but you're also making the best loan decisions along the way. Okay, so that's the federal direct student loan for your child.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a couple of quick questions. Number
sure.
one, is the loan interest on these loans tax deductible like mortgage interest?
There is, yes, there is, and I think it falls on the student, doesn't it? I think if yeah, it's gonna be on your child is gonna have that deduction, because remember, this is their debt, it's not yours. So it'll fall under their social security number.
And then the other question they were asking, how does the student get the loan? Is it sent directly to the college?
Yes. So after you submit the FAFSA, like I said, if it doesn't show up on that award letter, say you're not eligible for subsidized and there were no unsubsidized loans, call financial aid and say, hey, I want that 5,500. They're obligated to give it to you. It's unsubsidized. Basically you sign the promissory note, and what happens is, as I said at the beginning, there's a portal, and in that portal, at the college, it's going to say, this is what you owe for the semester, and that it'll get dispersed. Half of that loan or a third of that loan, if it's quarters, comes right off of what you owe. As you see here, there's an origination fee. It's about 1%, which is reasonable. So it won't be exactly 5,500 divided by 2. That's how it works. So it comes right off. It comes right off. And I think I've mentioned all this. You do need to do that loan entrance counseling once. So you could hop on with your child to their studentaid.gov account. We actually have a video on our YouTube channel. I did it, that walks you through how to do it. And then your child is going to sign the master promissory note after completing the loan counseling. And you'll be all set for the first year. Now I want to talk about the other federal loan. This is actually now called the Plus loan, but we've got Parent up there. Used to be called Parent Plus, and it really should still be, just so there's no confusion. Like I said, that the federal loan is all your child. They have all skin in the game, no other social security number. This is the other side. This is all the parent. One parent applies for this. It's very quick. Through studentaid.gov, you go on there and you apply. So if you're married, one parent can choose. If you're divorced, you choose what you want to do, but it's only the parent. Even if you have a handshake agreement with your child that, like, hey, we're going to do this, but this is your loan. Nobody's going to come after your child to pay this loan off. So keep that in mind. It's your debt exclusively. Just like the direct federal loan, there's a fixed interest rate. It goes up every year, just like that. You see here, this interest rate is way higher than the direct loan. 9.08, and look at that origination fee. It's huge. So I'm not a huge fan of these for most families. We'll talk about, for some families, this might be the way to go, but just be careful with this one. It's very expensive from the get-go. It tends to be easier. Not tends, it is easier to qualify. I'm going to talk about private loans and state loans in a minute. It's easier to qualify. If your credit score is lower, you can typically get this loan easier. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because you've really got to think about what's best for your overall picture. The government does have forgiveness programs, and that's something to keep in mind, but there's specifics to it. There's 10 years of payments, and you have to be in a certain type of job, and you have to have been in that job for over 14 years. So like I said earlier, you got to read the fine print of the forgiveness programs, and I wouldn't go into this just assuming that it's going to get forgiven. There's also tax ramifications when a loan is forgiven. You're going to have to pay taxes on that forgiven amount. So there's no free lunch, but this is the federal option for the parent. So it's the Plus loan. And you might have seen, you probably saw this on award letters, because the college can say, here's what we cost, our costs of attendance, minus grants, merit scholarships, direct federal loans, work study. Oh, and here's your Parent Plus loan for the difference. They can do that, and then you have to apply. But again, think about what makes sense for you. And I want to talk about the state and private options, because you might listen and say, those are going to be better options for our family. I think I already covered all this. It's the federal. You still got the federal government, which is positive. They have certain programs like the forgiveness programs that the other types of loans that I'm going to talk about do not, right? Only in one parent's name. Student can pay it back, but it is in no way their obligation. And you're pretty much approved or denied on the spot. And so some people will do this just to know, okay, I got this. I got this option. And then they look into the other options. So, all right, so those are the federal loans. Those are the federal options for the student and the parent. Now let's talk about state plans. So not every state has a student loan program, but a lot of them do. And most states, the way it's going to work is you either have to live in that state or you have to be going to college in that state to be eligible. So if you live in California and your child's going to school in Oregon, you could look at both of those states. There are 3 exceptions to the rule. Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Iowa, they will give loans to any student. So you don't have to live there and you don't have to go to college there. So in a minute, I'm going to show you a sheet. We have links to all of this for you. So it's very easy for you to click on Massachusetts and go there and see how that's going to work for you. So don't worry about that. I'm going to show it in a minute and Dan's going to put the link in the chat, but hold off on that for a minute. So this is another option that many people don't know about. This is with the state loans, it's pretty transparent. Like it's a certain loan rate and everybody gets it. But basically, this is not just your child applying. Your child's going to be on it, but so are you, because states and private lenders are not going to take on the risk that the federal government is willing to take on to give kids basically loans, right? So you're going to be on this plan, this loan, along with your child, and they're going to be looking at your credit history and your income to decide if you're eligible for the loan. Okay. So you're going to have the parent and the student name, or, grandparent and student are going to be part of it. Okay. And those 3 states are kind of unicorns here. So they're good to look at. Say the state that you're in doesn't have a student loan program and your child's going in state, so you don't have that option. Check out Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Iowa and see what that looks like. All right, so that's the state loan option. Then we have private loans. So this is a market that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and the Sally Mays of the world. You might not have heard of all these specific lenders. Most people know Sally Mae, but College Ave, SoFi. This is more where they are going to advertise what are called variable interest rates, and they're going to give a range. You're not going to know where you fall until you apply. It's going to be based again on your credit worthiness, right? They're going to take a risk on you. The higher your credit score, the better your interest rate should be in principle. That's how it should work. The student is definitely on that loan, but the parent is a cosigner, at least at the beginning. Some of them have cosigner release programs, but at the beginning, they're going to want somebody with a good credit score, with the ability to repay this loan on the loan before they will approve it. All of this is done online. It's not instant like the federal as far as if you're approved or not. So it can take a few days. So you definitely want to be jumping on this, right? Like I said, almost August 1, you want to see what your options are on this. So this is how the private loans work. So similar to state, except it is a variable interest rate. So what that means is interest rates go down, that can be a benefit. But if interest rates go up, not so much, right? You have interest rate risk in essence, okay? So what I want to do is I'm going to share my screen on a different screen, then I'll go into the alternative methods. But I just want to take a minute and show you, and Dan's going to share this link at the end. I don't want you getting in there now because I want you to listen to me for the tail end of this. We're almost done with the slides, but we're going to provide you with this. So what we recommend you do is pick a few of these lenders and apply to them. Earnest, the one at step 3, has actually come out this year and said, we will match competitors' rates. So get some other rates if you go into Earnest, and even if you can get 0.5% less, that is massive over the life of your loan. It will save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So as I said at the beginning, you want to cast a wide net. I do want to talk about what happens when you apply for these loans, because we've had people write into us and they are not going to disperse a loan and give you a firm interest rate without looking at your credit. So some of them will do what's called a soft pull. They ping your credit. Some are going to do what's called a hard pull. Before they give you a loan, and I've never worked for a lender, and I've never worked for any of the credit bureaus, but they're going to need to solidify, okay, we know the credit score and we know the credit of this person that's the cosigner with the student. So keep in mind, if you did this to like 7 different places, which I'm not encouraging you to do necessarily, you're going to have pings on your credit. And that could, if you have a great credit score or whatever your credit score is, it could go down a little. And so you have to think of this like risk reward. Don't go overboard and cast a massive net. But you do want to look at some of these, especially with Earnest's offer of matching. You're going to want to look at them. You know what the Parent Plus loan is. That's 9.08. Boom, done, right? You know what that is, and it's expensive with the high origination fee. So you want to kind of look at these and get, like I said at the beginning, it's similar to the colleges. Know what your different options are, and you can potentially play them off each other. Say you love something that College Ave offers, and they're not as low as Earnest. Earnest says they're going to match, but they want your business. This is a competitive market where they want the business, right? So play the cards you have, basically. So let's finish. I'm going to finish the last few slides here, and then I'll come back there. And I'll talk about how we can help you, and we'll go a little deeper on some of that. So let me go back to the slide. So remember at the beginning when I had my table of contents, we were talking about the alternative ways here. So home equity. Some of you might be sitting on a lot of home equity. You might own your home free and clear with no mortgage. That is awesome. There are ways to leverage that equity because we're in a high interest rate environment. It's not something that at CAP we've recommended over the last couple of years. Several years ago it was a no-brainer. I had people refining because they had a higher interest rate to a lower rate, pulling a chunk out, using it for college. Their principal and interest payments went down. I mean, it was wonderful, right? That's not where we're at right now. If you've refied and you have a really good interest rate, you do not want to be refinancing and pulling money out without really thinking about that, because your payment's going to go up. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of pieces there. If you're considering anything around that, you should really book time with us. And I'm going to talk about how we can support you in a minute on that. But that's the equity place. Not huge right now, just because of the interest rate. So keep in mind, in a couple years, if the Fed has ticked down interest rates, might be a different ballgame. But right now, for most families, this isn't the best place to go. I don't see this a lot with the families that I talk to, but once in a while I'll have a parent that says, "Oh, I'm going to tap my 401k. It's huge." Makes my skin crawl a little bit. I mean, you are literally robbing your retirement, okay? And you need to, for one, you need to look at your plan and see if you're even allowed to do it, because it has to be written into the plan document. And just look at what the interest rate is, and look at, just like everything, read the fine print and be very careful when you do this. And when you take a loan out, you need to keep track of that. If you leave that job, or God forbid, get laid off, you're going to have to repay that loan right away. So this one, for most families, I don't love it, but as we've said, every family is different, but we're just putting that out there, that is an option. Intra-family loans. I've seen this on and off through the years, where a grandparent, or sometimes parents, will even say, "I have the money, but I want my child to have skin in the game," and they actually do up their own promissory note. You can find a template online. And it doesn't affect financial aid in any way. Sometimes grandparents will want to do this. The biggest negative to this is it's money between family, right? And that can cause friction, and family relationships are, in my mind, the most important thing, not money, right? Not all this crazy stuff, but that is something that I've seen effectively used by certain families in certain circumstances. And then lastly, life insurance. If you currently have a policy, a cash value life insurance policy, certain types where you can borrow against it. Do not take the money out. That can be very punitive. Taking the distribution when it comes to financial aid. But if you have a policy like that and you have a financial advisor, which I'm assuming you do, if you have that policy and you bought it for specific reasons that fit into your overall financial plan, not just looking at this through the financial aid silo, that could be a good option, right? But that's some people. And when you get in this space, there are insurance salesmen out there that will approach you and say, hey, you've got this money, put it in a life insurance because it'll be off the table on certain financial aid forms in schools and you're hiding it. A bunch of that is true, but it's not necessarily a good idea. For what I've seen for most of my families through all these years, it isn't, right? But it is something that's out there. And if you have this at this stage of the game, if you have this and this was part of your strategy, then do it prudently so that if you are getting need-based financial aid, that you're not hurting your packages for subsequent years. But that is a bucket. So last but not least, this is just a little bit of throwing it all together, if you will. So I've talked about several different types of options. As I said in the beginning, it really depends on your family and what matters for your family. Of course, the lowest interest rate, everybody loves that. We want to have the lowest interest rate. So how much does the rate matter? If you have different quotes and you look at the specs of these different loans and you can get the lowest rate with the Iowa State program, that makes the most sense. Great, right? For some families, parents are, they care who's on the loan. I have a lot of parents through the years, and I'm sure Dan has too, like, I don't want to be on all these loans. I want my child to pay a third of this. I've heard this all the time. We're divorced, a third, a third, a third. I'm like, your child can't pay a third on loans. You're going to be on some of those loans, right? So how much does that matter? If it really matters that you're not on these loans, then the Parent Plus loan is out, right? Because it is your debt. Your child is not on it at all. So that's something that wouldn't even be on the table. Some families, they don't really care about that. So it's like, let's look at the mix, and I'm okay covering a certain amount through the loans. They can cover the direct federal loans, and I'm okay covering the difference. I'm okay co-signing. This is a family decision. It's a family discussion. We're here to give you, all of the data, and then we can help you decide that on a one-on-one. But this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, and you see what's being offered to you and what the pluses and minuses are of the different options. 3 and 4 kind of go together. How much do I value consumer protection, flexibility, and do I want to pay a little bit more? We're putting quotes around an insurance. It's not insurance. That's why we have the quotes. But this is referencing the Parent Plus loan. Like, it's a federal loan, as I said. So there's certain protections there. The federal government, the forgiveness, they have different ways. They have pay as you earn, income driven repayment. They have different ways to deal with repayment that the state plans and the private loans are not going to have. More flexibility. If you're in a job that, like, you have huge years in sales, and then you could have a year that's down, or it's dependent on certain things, and it's like this might matter to you, and you might say, well, you know what, Peg, I'm willing to pay that origination fee and a higher interest rate because I know I have that protection because it's a federal loan. So as I've been saying over and over again, that I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but really depends on your family. So, and then the last, number 5, is what I've already talked about. Home equity is on the table right now. It's not one that we're really encouraging. I can't imagine any of you have a mortgage that is, unless you just bought your home, you might have a high mortgage interest rate. But if you've owned your home for a while, I'm sure your interest rate is much lower than the going rates for 30 and 15 year. So again, if that is something in your mind, we can definitely talk about that with you, but just talking to the masses, it might not be something that most people will consider in this interest rate environment. So let me take a minute and go back to where I was before. So talked about a lot of stuff, and I've referenced a couple times, we can support you on that. We can help you with that. What we are offering our live audience, and what we would strongly, Dan and I would strongly encourage you to do, is book an hour with one of our experts. We've got a 20%, and Dan, if you could put the link to the landing page in the chat and the coupon code, that would be great. The coupon code is pay in caps 20. So it's 20% off an hour with one of our experts. We have an expert team. Dan's on it. Like I said earlier, he's the first guy I recruited onto the team. But we have people that are actually at colleges. The guy who runs scholarships at University of Oklahoma, former financial aid director at USC, a guy who's at Sloan Business School at MIT, Harvard School of Medicine. And we also have financial people that have decades of experience doing exactly this, working with families to help with every step of the process, and this being that last step in your journey. What we can cover on this meeting, we can talk about, hey, what are the best loan options for you, right? We can talk about that. We can also talk about, even before that, if you're not sure you got the best offer from the school, you're not sure that you did the forms right, we can actually look at your forms, and it's not too late to say, you know what? Yeah, you included something as your child's asset that really wasn't. We need to go back to this one college and get them to recalculate. So we can, that's like the step before this. But if that's something that's kind of keeping you up at night, we can talk about that. We can talk about the best strategy. If doing these forms, these loan apps, is like blowing your mind. I work with a lot of people through the years where just numbers, it kind of paralyzes them, right? Just like, I'm not good, numbers are my thing, but there's other things I'm not good at, right? So if that's really bothering you, we can actually help you get those done so that that's off your plate. And then if you need help with the master promissory note or the loan entrance counseling, we can in there. And then lastly, what's most near and dear to my heart, if you really want to look at this over 4 years, like, what should I be borrowing? How should I be using that 529? Or grandma, grandpa have said this amount. How should I use that and minimize my loans and use up what the funds that I have? All of these we can help you with. What we would recommend is, and this is just what I showed you earlier, same page. This is all on the page that Dan put in the chat, and we'll also send it to you in an email. So don't worry about that either. If you're comfortable doing these, do a couple of these before you jump on our meeting, if you're comfortable, because then we'll have some data to start talking about and strategizing with you. If you want to wait and do it on the meeting, that's fine. Whatever's in your comfort zone, it's all good. Very easy to use this coupon. So when you're in your MyCap software, so here's my sample family here. All you do is go up here to talk to an expert. You click on that. Don't forget to apply the coupon, pay 20. I forget the exact language. It says like apply coupon or enter promo code, and it's small and it's in a different color. And sometimes people will write in and say, I missed it. Can you refund the difference? It's there. So put it in. You'll see the 20% come out. Follow the prompts, and then you're going to end up to a place that looks like this. I've already put in credit card, and then it's going to say you're ready to book your one-on-one session. You're going to click on, when you get in there, premium plus expert. Go through all that. It'll back it out. It'll be $279. It's going to be money well spent if you have stress around this part of the process. Click here, and this is what you're going to see. You could pick next available. It's going to give you a calendar. You pick what works for you. You get the Zoom. You're off to the races. If you want to pick a specific person that here's Dan. Pick Dan, hit next. You're going to get his calendar, and you can book a meeting. I would recommend booking it as soon as possible, okay? Because as I said earlier, time isn't on your side here. So that's how you book it. use the pay 20 coupon. We're happy to help you. That coupon expires tonight. So go on there and book it. Even if you feel like, okay, I'm good. I might want to talk about something in 3 weeks, but I think I know what loan I want, but that 4 year, I really want to get into the weeds on that. Just book it. And then you buy the coupon, and you can use the coupon, buy the hour, and you can go back in and schedule later. You can also reschedule. Like, don't book something and then reschedule a day before, because that's not fair to our experts, because they're holding that spot. But if you realize you can't do that exact time tomorrow, you can just change it. So there's a lot going on here. I missed the code. Yeah, the coupon code is PAY 20. Strongly recommend you do that. This is the last step. Keep your head down, and you'll get there. So are we good, Dan? Any other questions?
We're good, Peg.
All right. Okay, everybody. Well, I hope this was helpful. I hope it cleared up some questions that you had, and keep us in mind. We are here to support you. If anything comes up, you have any issues booking the meeting, you can always write us at support@collegeaidpro.com. We have a support team that monitors that email during business hours, and we'll respond quickly to answer your questions if you're having any issues getting it booked. And as I said earlier, you will get a follow-up email with the recording, the link to the landing page, so that you'll have all that information available. So, all right, everybody, great to have you, and have a great rest of the day, and I will see you later, Dan.
See you, Peg. Bye,
All
everybody.
right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.